Behind the curtains of Southern mansions, history hid a disturbing truth. White women, celebrated as angels of purity, guardians of morality, delicate daughters of virtue, harbored nasty obsessions with the very men their society called dangerous and subhuman. These weren't love stories. They were filthy secrets, secrets that left scars across generations, secrets that could break your heart. Picture a candle flickering in a dark bedroom. A floorboard creaks. Footsteps echo in the hallway. Outside in the distance, the faint sound of chains dragging across wooden floors. What happens when power, desire, and cruelty collide in silence? The setting is the American South, the 1700s into the 1800s. A society built on the brutality of slavery. Plantations stretched for miles. Wealth harvested by enslaved hands. Luxury fed by black suffering. White women were raised as symbols of innocence and purity, perched atop a pedestal polished with hypocrisy. They were painted as fragile and holy, carriers of family honor, bound in layers of lace and religion. Meanwhile, black men were cast as the very opposite, animalistic, feared, forbidden. Demonized as brutes, yet forced to work inside the very households that condemned them. Some were butlers, carriage drivers, attendants, body servants, always close enough to be seen, always within reach, always trapped inside an atmosphere of secrecy. The home became a cage where proximity and obsession could flourish. Imagine being trapped in a world where your very existence was fetishized by those who claim to own you. A system where the same women who clutch Bibles at dawn could whisper unspeakable commands after midnight. Where every room, every hallway, every glance carried the weight of danger. This is where the nasty obsessions began. Slavery was not only about chains in the fields, it was about power inside the household. Black men were stripped of dignity, reduced to brute labor, and yet paradoxically feared for their strength. That fear created a twisted paradox. The very qualities demonized by society became the fuel for secret fantasies. In public, these men were degraded. In private, they became objects of dangerous obsession. The system of slavery enforced silence. Any scandal involving white women and black men was more than shameful. It was catastrophic. It threatened the illusion of racial purity, the fragile foundation of Southern society. White men could openly rape enslaved women without consequence. But a whisper of a white woman's desire for a black man was unspeakable. If such secrets were revealed, it was not the white woman who paid the price. It was the enslaved man. Behind closed doors, away from the public gaze, some of the dirtiest realities took root. White women, locked inside their own cages of repression, projected forbidden desires onto the bodies of the very men they claimed to despise. Their obsessions festered in silence, hidden in the shadows of parlors and bedrooms, waiting for a chance to erupt. And when those obsessions surfaced, they carried consequences more disturbing than any romance could ever conceal. Because these were not affairs of love. They were exercises in domination, power, and destruction, filthy secrets dressed in lace. But the darkest realities were not in the control. They were in the hidden desires festering in silence. Obsession with the forbidden body became a silent epidemic. Enslaved men were not seen as human. They were exoticized, fetishized, treated as trophies of secret conquest. White women praised for their purity, secretly reduced black men to objects of their fantasies. These encounters were not choices for the enslaved. They were commands. They were moments orchestrated in hidden rooms, in night visits when no one else was watching, when refusal meant punishment and compliance meant humiliation. The filthy lie of innocence gave white women the ultimate cover. Society believed they were incapable of such behavior, too delicate, too pure to even think of it. That illusion became their shield. Behind it, they could indulge obsessions without fear of suspicion. But the risk of exposure always lingered. And when that risk appeared, when the walls of secrecy threatened to crumble, many white women turned to the most devastating weapon they had: accusations. To save themselves, they lied. They screamed assault, casting enslaved men as predators. And in a society poisoned by racism, those words were a death sentence. Countless black men were lynched, mutilated, executed, killed not for crimes they committed, but for desires projected onto them by their white mistresses. These were not just dirty secrets. They were unspeakable betrayals, turning obsession into a tool of destruction. The power games went beyond the bedroom. Some white women humiliated enslaved men in daily life, forcing them into degrading tasks, mocking their bodies, making them symbols of control rather than people. For these women, cruelty was not a contradiction of purity, it was its disguise. They could commit unspeakable acts and still be called innocent, while the enslaved men carried the shame, the scars, the blame. The impact was devastating. Imagine the torment of living in a world where your body was both desired and despised. Denial meant violence. Compliance meant humiliation. There was no safe path, no voice of defense. An enslaved man accused by a white woman had no chance in court. His word weighed less than silence. His fate could be decided by a whisper. Families lived in terror. Wives, mothers, and children knew that any moment, a white woman's obsession, or her lie, could lead to separation, punishment, or death. To protect loved ones, some enslaved men endured in silence. Others carried invisible scars, shamed for something they never chose. The destruction went far beyond individuals. It fractured families, poisoned generations, left shadows that still linger in Black history and Black culture today. And yet, even the filthiest lies could not stay buried forever. Slave narratives told truths white women tried to erase. Survivors whispered about the late-night visits, the hidden encounters, the humiliations that left them broken. Court records told the story in blood. Men executed after accusations, trials that exposed the undercurrent of forbidden relationships. Plantation gossip hinted at mistresses with favorites, rumors that families dismissed as slander but feared were true. Even letters and journals written in careful code revealed suspicions that white women were not the saints their portraits painted them to be. The disturbing reality is clear. The world pretended these acts never happened, but the records say otherwise. History tried to silence these voices, but they survive, whispering across time. Today, the reaction is still divided. Some historians defend white women as victims of their own repression, arguing they were trapped by patriarchy. Others refuse to let their cruelty hide behind excuses, pointing to patterns of domination and betrayal. Black families remember these stories differently, passed down in hushed tones, carried in oral histories as warnings and scars. For them, these dirty secrets were never forgotten. They lived in the silence of mothers who wept, fathers who carried shame, children who grew up with unspoken trauma. Yet even now, museums and plantation tours gloss over these truths. They focus on male slaveholders' crimes while ignoring the disturbing role of white mistresses. Silence protects the myth of innocence, but silence is a lie. Why did these obsessions run so deep? Theories offer disturbing answers. White women's sexuality was policed to the extreme. Every desire shamed, every thought controlled. For some, enslaved men became the outlet for forbidden hunger, a projection of fantasies they were told to bury. For others, it was power itself, proof that they too could dominate, could bend lives to their will. Jealousy also played a role. Many white women targeted Black men because their enslaved sisters attracted the attention of white fathers, brothers, and husbands. By taking what was forbidden, they sought to reassert control. But at its core, the obsession revealed cultural hypocrisy. Society painted white women as pure, while demonizing Black men as dangerous. That false purity became their weapon, a mask that concealed cruelty. And the more Black men were demonized, the more they became objects of disturbing fascination. It was a psychological hunger for the forbidden, fed by lies of innocence and enforced by the brutality of slavery. When purity becomes a mask for cruelty, when innocence hides obsession, what does that reveal about the filthy core of slavery itself? Picture the closing scene. A candlelight fades in a dark plantation bedroom. In the silence, the faint sound of chains rattles. A woman weeps softly, but it is not she who pays the price. It is the man who never had a choice. The nasty obsessions of white women with Black male slaves remain one of history's dirtiest secrets. Not acts of love, but unspeakable acts of power, hypocrisy, and destruction. They left scars on families, broke spirits, and created stories so disturbing they were buried for centuries. These stories break your heart not just because they happen, but because silence still shields them from the full weight of truth. When obsession hides behind innocence and cruelty wears the mask of purity, history itself becomes a filthy lie.